it's Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. It has been a long time since I have done like actual content videos regularly for you guys, so I am going to be more diligent going forward about doing these because the requests are piling up for videos. You guys have been asking me in Instagram DMs, comments, all over the place for a long time. You guys have been requesting a lot of different videos on editing and agents and traditional publication and self-publication and all different kinds of things, and so I am finally going to be more diligent, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, to be having more weekly videos for you all. I have been doing some vlogs recently because that has been something I really wanted to do, but also it was a little bit easier because those were things I was already doing in my daily life, and then I just vlogged it for you guys. But I'm going to be making more actual content videos for you guys going forward. So today's video is going to be about why I decided to self-publish, and I had meant to post this video a long time ago, but whenever I was editing the footage, I realized that a big chunk of it accidentally got deleted, and so I needed to re-record the entire video, which I'm doing now, but I just never sat down and re-recorded it. I recorded a bunch of other videos instead, so we're finally getting around to it, and I'm finally going to be talking about why I made the choice to switch from traditional publication to indie publishing. Now, as a little bit of a background, because it's a little bit important for me to explain this, I pursued traditional publication for, I think it was about 8 years. 6 years, maybe 6 to 8 years. And so I spent a long time querying agents, talking to agents. I actually had an offer of representation, which I will put up in the cards. You can go and check that video out. I explain all about that situation and why I ultimately turned down that agent, so you can go and check that out if you're interested. But I had a lot of things happen during my journey pursuing traditional publication. I went to conferences, like I said, had an offer, I queried over 100 agents, and that was for 2 separate books. So I queried the first novel that I ever wrote, and then I also queried What Lies Above, which is going to now be my debut whenever I indie publish. So I want to specifically talk about What Lies Above because the first novel that I started it when I was 12 and I started querying it when I was 14, so I was very, very young, and I did not understand how traditional publishing worked at all, so I basically just thought I would send it out and someone would publish it for me. And if you know anything about traditional publishing, that is definitely not how it works. It's a lot more complex than that, and I learned that the hard way. I learned by a lot of experience. I didn't know anything about the writing community at that time when I was 14, and I was not knowledgeable about querying at all. So I learned a lot of what I share with you all. I learned a lot of that from just experience and from making mistakes and learning things myself. So whenever I went to go and publish, or whenever I went to go and query What Lies Above, it was a little bit different because at that point I had dipped my feet into the writing community a little bit, and I found this amazing resource of YouTube and different blogs and social media where people who were already published and people who were pursuing publication put all these resources out there to help other people who were also pursuing traditional publication in their own journeys. And so I started learning things both by experience and from research as well. So with What Lies Above, to kind of give you the very, very condensed version of my journey with What Lies Above with traditional publishing, I started writing What Lies Above when I was 16, and I finished the first draft when I was 18, and I started querying it immediately the year that I turned 18. So I wasn't quite 18 yet, but I started querying it the year that I turned 18. And I got a little bit of interest. Not a lot, but my original query was not very good. So I got a tiny bit of interest, but mostly rejections. And again, I was very young and I had not edited my query at all. I basically just wrote up something real fast and sent it out to a bunch of agents. And so I did actually get an email back from one agent though who was interested in doing an R&R, which is a revise and resubmit. And so basically she really liked the concept and she liked my writing, but she thought that the book could use some revisions. And so she recommended some revisions and said that if I did revise the book that she would look at it again. And so I actually did decide to do the R&R. I did a big revision on my book and I sent it back to her. And so I actually had gotten that email from her on my 18th birthday, the night before my 18th birthday. And so I did this big revision for a few months and I sent it back to her. I think it was maybe at the end of that year. So my birthday's in August, so it had been a few months, and so I sent it back to her. And ultimately she declined representation, but that edit did make What Lies Above much, much stronger, and it was what ultimately started my long journey to where the book is now, which is almost ready for publication. And so the book has changed a lot since that first time, but I'm really, really grateful for that first R&R because it got me thinking about the revisions that the book ultimately needed to have, and it made me realize that the book could be strengthened and that it was not perfect the way it was, and so I am really grateful for that. But after that point, I continued querying the book to a lot of agents over several years. So I would query, and then I would get mostly in the end rejections, and so I would do another revision. Sometimes I would take some time off. I took a year hiatus, and then I came back, and then I did another revision, and in total I've probably revised the book, like completely overhauled it and revised it at least 4 times, probably more. And so I did a lot of revisions, and I did have agent interest. I had got multiple partials and multiple full requests later on after I had revised it a lot, after I had strengthened my query, after I had gotten some critique partners, and so I started getting more partials and more full requests, and ultimately I got the offer that I did turn down. So now we get to earlier this year. So earlier this year I was still pursuing traditional publication. That was my dream. I wanted to be, for as long as I can remember, I have wanted to be published by a traditional publishing house. I wanted to sign with an agent, and I mean, that was my dream. And so I never considered self-publishing. In fact, people had recommended it to me, and to be completely honest, I completely rejected it, and I really fed into the stigma that self-published authors only self-publish if they can't make it in the traditional publishing world, which is not the case at all. That was completely a false stigma, but I definitely believed that. And so I wanted to be published by a traditional publishing house with a real agent, and I did not want to indie publish at all. But then we got to the beginning of this year, and my viewpoint completely changed on indie publishing for several reasons, which I'm going to talk about. There are actually 4 reasons why I ultimately decided to self-publish, and so I'm going to go through and talk about each of them. But I do want to say before we begin that I was completely wrong about self-publishing, and I believe that self-publishing is just as viable an option for authors as traditional publishing is. There are pros and cons to both of them. If you guys want me to do a video on, the pros and cons of self-publishing and traditional publishing, I definitely can do that if you just want to put a comment down below and let me know. There's definitely pros and cons to both of them, but in the end, both of them are completely legitimate, viable options, and they each have great things about them, and it's just what fits you best. And so for me, I ultimately made a decision to indie publish with What Lies Above, and I'm really glad I did. In the beginning, I kind of was a little bit on the fence about whether or not I had made the right decision, but now I really do think that I made the right decision, and so I'm going to go through my 4 reasons why I decided to self-publish. Okay, so the first reason is something that ties back to what I was talking about with my traditional publishing journey, which was the fact that even though I was getting lots of partials, lots of fulls, and that ultimate offer, I never received an offer of representation that I actually accepted. I never had an agent that offered me representation that I wanted to work with that met my criteria for what I was looking for in an agent. And so I came to a point earlier in 2020, I think it was around January or February, where I had to decide, do I want to put aside What Lies Above and query another book, or do I want to self-publish What Lies Above? And the reason that I had to make that decision was because I had been rejected by probably 150 maybe agents for What Lies Above, and some of them I actually resubmitted to, because with some agents they will receive or accept resubmissions if you have really drastically changed the book with a revision, and I did drastically change What Lies Above. I added a completely new point of view narrator, so it was dual point of view, and I completely changed a lot of the book, so I ended up resubmitting it to a lot of agents, and I still got a lot of rejections, even with a really strong query letter and a newly revised manuscript. But a lot of those agents said that they wanted to see my next book that I wrote, which I had actually already written about 2/3 of, which is my YA fantasy novel. I've mentioned a little bit if you've been following my channel for a little while, but I had written almost 2/3 of a new book, which was not related to What Lies Above at all, and so they wanted to see that manuscript as soon as I was done. So I finally got to a point where I had to ask myself, do I want to put What Lies Above in the drawer and query this new YA fantasy, or did I want What Lies Above to be my debut? And this is just a personal decision. I think every author has to come to a point where they make a personal decision for their journey, but for me, I wanted What Lies Above to be my debut. I have been with this book for a long time, and it really does mean so much to me, and these characters mean so much to me, and so for me, I wanted to share this book with the world. And I knew that if I queried my next book, it was possible I would get an agent offer of representation, potentially. I didn't know, obviously, but I could have, and I could have gone on submission with that book, and I could have had that book published, and maybe we could have come back to What Lies Above in the future once I had signed with an agent. But I wanted What Lies Above to be my debut, and it's a personal decision. There's a lot of reasons why, but I wanted this book to be the first thing that people saw, and I wanted these characters to get to tell their story, and I wanted the world to see this book. And it wasn't just that I didn't know when to give up, because I knew when to put aside my first novel and move on to What Lies Above. But with What Lies Above, there's something so special about it to me, and I wanted it to be out there in the world. And so I ultimately decided that I wanted to self-publish What Lies Above, and that I would rather indie publish and have What Lies Above be my debut than to put it aside and query my next book. Now, there are some authors who say, I want to traditionally publish no matter what. So they will keep writing books and writing books and writing books, and if they don't receive any offers, they'll put the book aside and they'll write a new book. And that is completely okay also. I know some authors who have written 6 or 7 books before they signed with their agent. And for them, that was what they chose, that was what they wanted, and that's what ultimately they loved. And so if that's what you want to do, that's perfectly okay. But for me, I wanted What Lies Above to be my debut, and so I decided to self-publish with it so that it would be the first book that I put out there in the world. I think that is one of the reasons why What Lies Above genuinely does mean so much to me. It just shows how much it means by the fact that I was willing to sacrifice potentially having agent offers with a new book so that What Lies Above could be my debut. Like, it meant that much to me that I would basically do everything myself in indie publishing just so that I could share this story with you guys, rather than put it aside and have agents look at the next book when agents were saying, like, we want to see this book, send it to us as soon as you're done. And it was a really hard decision to make, because when you have a bunch of agents telling you, we really love your writing style and your voice, and we want to see your next work as soon as you're done, send it to us, and then you have this book over here that just means something personally to you and you're passionate about it, but it's not receiving the offers, and you have to make this decision between, do I stick with this book of my heart and basically stick it out alone in indie publishing, or do I put it aside and go with this other YA fantasy novel that all of these agents are wanting to see, and potentially I could traditionally publish. So I had to make that decision, and it was hard. I struggled with it for a long time at the beginning of this year, but ultimately I decided I was going to stick with What Lies Above, and I don't regret it now at all. I'm really glad that I chose it to stick with it, and I'm really glad that it's going to be the first book that you guys see. So now we get to point number 2, which is creative control. So something about me is that I am very controlling, in the sense that I like to have my hands in the process of things. So whether it's at school, whenever I had classes or group projects, I always was really hands-on. I really love graphic design. I love organization. I'm just a very hands-on person. I like things to be organized and controlled. And so with publishing, like I said, I always wanted to be traditionally published, but with traditional publishing, you have a big team with a lot of people, which is definitely a benefit, but it also means that all of those people are doing all of those jobs. Whereas with indie publishing, you have your hands in the process a lot more, which again is not to say that you have no control in traditional. But with indie, you can have a ton of control if you want, or you can hire people to do things if you don't want to handle that. So for example, I designed my own book cover, and I will pop it up here if you guys haven't seen it, if you're new to my channel. I designed my own book cover, and I'm going to be doing a video about how I designed it and all of that in the future. But I designed it, I knew the vision that I wanted, and I made it happen, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So I was able to do that, whereas if I had traditionally published, I would not have been able to do that. I might have been able to give input, but they would have had a cover designer who designed the book based on the market and the expectations of the genre and all of that. So I would not have been able to create from scratch my own book cover. So that was something that, one of the things I really loved about indie publishing, is I get to do that. I get to do the formatting for my book, I get to do the marketing and the promotion, I get to have relationships with you guys and build that foundation for the book that whenever it comes out, I already have so many people that have said, I want an ARC, I want a pre-order, I want the book when it comes out, I cannot wait to have it. And it's those really personal relationships that I absolutely love, and I love doing that. I love making all of the Instagram photos and the graphics for promotional stuff and marketing. I just love that stuff. And so that creative control was definitely something that was a benefit for me and something that really made me interested in indie publishing once I started to learn more about it. Another thing is that I can choose my own release date, which I really like as well. And that also ties into my third point, which is a flexible timeline. That was one thing, probably one of the biggest things that made me ultimately decide to indie publish, and that's because I am still in school, and so I have a very, very crazy busy schedule, especially now with COVID and everything that's happened this year. Things are so uncertain and so crazy, and in going into my future, my career is not in writing. I would love to be a full-time author, but my career is actually in education. So with teaching and writing, it's really great to be able to have a flexible timeline, and I can release books 6 months apart if I want, or I can release books a year apart if I want. I get to make the decision on when the books come out and what month they come out and what years they come out and how many books I release in a year. I get to make all of those decisions, and I really love that because I can make it work with my schedule. So for example, I like to draft books in the summer, and then I edit them during my semesters, either fall or spring, and then I can work over my Christmas break as well, so I can kind of make it fit with my school schedule. And then in the future, whenever I'm a full-time teacher, I can make it work with that schedule as well, since I'll have summers off and everything too. So I really loved that, and it was one of probably the biggest perks to indie publishing whenever I was weighing both of them against each other. And finally, we get to point number 4, and I said that flexible timeline was one of the most important things, but this one is also really important just for the fact that it's close to my heart. And this fourth point is because of my faith. Now this one is going to be a little bit hard to explain because I think that people will start asking a lot of questions or making a lot of assumptions about what I'm saying, and so I want to put up a disclaimer that before I explain this one, I am not saying that you cannot be a Christian and be traditionally published. That is not the case at all. You look at so many authors out there, Mary Weber, Nadine Brandes, like anyone who has a Christian platform, who writes books that are in the secular market, but they are a Christian author, you can do it. You can have a traditional agent, you can have a traditional publisher, you can have traditional book deals and still be a believer. That's not what I'm saying at all. But for me, I have certain values that are absolutely foundational to who I am, to my life. I love Jesus. I love my faith. My relationship with God is the most important thing in my life. And so for me, I wanted to be able to have absolute, complete control over what I write, what I put in my books, and what I don't put in my books. And so I knew that with indie publishing, I could do that, and that I could put this book out in the world, and it doesn't necessarily have to fit neatly into one box of a genre. So I am a Christian, but I don't write Christian books. I do write secular books. They could easily fit into the secular market, but they fit within my Christian worldview. So for example, there's not any sex or curse words in my books. So that's something that fits with my worldview and my values, but it's still a secular book. So it kind of straddles both. It would not fit in the Christian fiction section of a bookstore. It could definitely fit in the secular part of a bookstore, but it still fits my values. And so for me, I definitely could have gone the traditional route. It would have been completely fine. But with indie publishing, I have ultimate control of what I publish and what I write, and I really love that. I can write whatever book I want, and to take it off from just faith, I can write whatever I want, even if maybe it doesn't fit the genres perfectly. I can do that. I can blend genres. I can write books that maybe are a little bit riskier, that take risks with genres, and I really love that. So for me, in the end, having creative control, having a flexible timeline, being able to write within my values and across any genres that I want, or maybe write a book that doesn't fit as neatly and takes more risks, and then also deciding that I wanted to publish What Lies Above instead of moving on with another book. Those were the 4 main reasons that I decided to self-publish. A lot of those were really personal. They were just personal to me, and so someone else might decide to do something different. I have gotten some DMs from quite a few people over on Instagram where you guys have been saying that you are struggling right now with also making the decision between whether you want to self-publish or you want to pursue traditional publishing. And it can be a stressful decision, but I just want to I guess, encourage you. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. I want to encourage you guys that think about what it is that you want for your writing and for your book. And that's why I think it would be really beneficial if I made a video comparing self-publishing with traditional publishing, because I did not know all the differences and the pros and cons of each either. So I'll definitely do that for you guys. I think that would be beneficial. But in the end, it's about what works for you and your book. And if you're scared that self-publishing means that you're not going to reach as many people or that your book's not going to be as successful, I just want to let you know that indie publishing is completely acceptable, and not only acceptable, but a great way to get your book out there. And there are a lot of people who are indie publishing right now who are very successful, and they are selling books and they are connecting with their audience because they have the passion behind it. They're running the show, they're making the creative decisions, and it really shows in how they handle their book and how they market it, that they're the heart behind it. And they're the one that is, if not designing the cover, hiring the person, and they're the one who is doing the majority of the marketing, and they're reaching out to other Bookstagram accounts, and they're creating those relationships, and it's an amazing thing. So traditional publishing is awesome and wonderful and amazing, but indie publishing is awesome and amazing and wonderful also. So either way that you choose, pick what's best for you and what's best for your book, and then don't worry about what happens after, because you will find your audience if you're doing what you love and if you have the passion behind it. It might take time and it might be hard and it will require a lot of work, I guarantee you, but in the end, your book will find its audience. So I hope that this helped. I hope this answered some of your questions about why I decided to self-publish. If you have any more questions, leave me a comment. I will definitely be down in the comments answering any questions that you guys have about why I decided to self-publish, any of the maybe trials or problems I've run into with self-publishing, or any questions about traditional publishing or why I decided not to traditionally publish. So that is all for today, and thank you guys so much for watching. Again, leave any comments or requests for future videos down below. Also, you can go follow me on Instagram at author Caitlin Lambert. I post over there quite frequently, and there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff over there, so definitely go check that out. And I will see you guys in my next video. Like I said, I'm going to be posting a lot more content related videos, so stay tuned and subscribe if you are not subscribed so you don't miss any of my future content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!